Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. Christ was revealed in flesh, proclaimed among the nations, and believed in throughout the world. Hear the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to John. There was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rite of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The Gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So in the weeks leading up to Christmas, and perhaps afterwards, you've received Amazon boxes. And the box arrives, and it's the thing you ordered. And you say, "That's just the thing. Let's get it unpacked." And so you take out your X-Acto knife and you peel away the proprietary tape, and you start unpacking your box. And you put to the side the things that you're not going to need. The instruction booklet, the box itself, the styrofoam that keeps it safe, the little box of accessories, the various bits and bobs that don't look like the thing. And eventually, you should probably even treat the packaging okay, because you might want to return it, and so you don't cut the tags off. And you're organized about the way you take things out until you get to what you want. Well, it's a little bit like that with a sermon and a text. And so your preacher this morning, on Tuesday morning, after a extended family holiday, sent his family home. And on that Tuesday morning, he got up nice and early. He put on his best black suit. He shaved closely. He splashed on a little bit of Midnight in Newcastle. And he sat down in front of his computer with the text for next Sunday up on his computer screen. There it is, John 2, 1 to 11. I've got it. I know what to do with that. Changing water into wine. I've been there. Been asked to do more than was possible in certain jobs and in certain places. Turning water into wine. Who do you think I am? Do you think I'm Jesus? The question that poses itself is, how will this be useful? Because there's a sense in which this is a miracle story. And if you look at what the old masters painted when they painted the story of a miracle, they had everyone in the first row doing this, amazed. And then they perhaps had other people, and the other people were in the back, and they were talking with each other, and they were pointing. But they were equally amazed. Miracles are supposed to amaze. And this story comes to us from what's called the Book of Signs. Let me give you a little bit of the packing from the Amazon box, which I didn't think would be necessary. So the Gospel of John is divided into 3 major sections, one of which we read at Christmas, the hymn to the Word. The prologue in the beginning was the Word. And that goes up until about the 19th or 20th verse of the first chapter. And the end of the Gospel is what's called the Book of Glory. And that begins with the moment that Jesus washes the feet of his disciples and contains all the discourses in John that you know very well. Everything about the vine and the branches, the high priestly prayer of Jesus, all those intimate discussions of the relationship between God and his Spirit with the community of believers and with the individual believer as well. And these are the bits of the Gospel of John that you read when you are perplexed or reflective or in trouble, and they're all the bits that you know. And in the middle section is what's called the Book of Signs. And there are 7 signs. It says in our reading today that this was the first of the signs which he did at Cana in Galilee. The changing of the water into wine, the healing of the royal official's son, the healing of the paralytic at the poolside, the feeding of the 5,000 with fish and loaves, walking on the water, healing a man born blind, and finally the raising of Lazarus. These are signs, and they do what signs do when you're driving down the road. They point you to something. And there are a component part of the Gospel of John. And in the presence of these signs, the first row of people present hold their hands up like this because they are amazed at what they have seen. And it is accompanied generally by a description of some of the men and women there believing and beginning to follow Jesus. What do you do in the presence of a sign? You are amazed. And it may well be that the presence of a sign like this is to tell us that Jesus is who he says he is, and he is worthy of being greeted with that amazement. But this would be a short sermon. So we're going to unpack the Amazon box, and we're going to take out the things that this sermon is not about. This sermon is not about wine. Bootleggers smuggle it. Wine merchants sell it legitimately and compare the wine that you're wanting to eat with the meal that you and your spouse are about to cook. Vintners cultivate the vines and they do their magic and they come up with the finished product. The wine which pours forth in this story is good wine. But this is not a sermon about the quality of wine. I was berated on my 3rd Sunday here at All Saints by a visitor who took umbrage with the fact that we served a modest little paper cup worth of bubbly after the service. He thought this is no place for wine, and this is certainly no place for it in this particular sermon. And then there is the dilemma, which Jesus solves, of a ruined party. Jesus fixes a certain number of things in the course of his ministry. As he preaches and teaches in the villages of Galilee and Judea, there are lepers who are healed. There are blind people who begin to see again. There are people who are disgraced and marginalized and outcast who are restored to community. So Jesus fixes things, and in one sense, Jesus fixes this party. But it is not the fixing of inexpertly catered parties, which is at the heart of this story, or should be at the heart of this sermon. We'll leave that for some other time. Nor is it a question of do what your mother tells you. In fact, I suspect that Our Lady doesn't come off terribly well in this particular sermon. I remember hearing a sermon where someone said that Our Lady said this to Jesus with a look of mirth and glee on her face, in the terms of when you go to a particularly posh event and something outrageous happens and you put your hand over your face and you turn to your friend as the first violinist drops his violin, or as the soloist trips over a wire across the stage, or the conductor loses control of his baton and it ends up somewhere in the brass section. But even at its very best, Our Lady states what is obvious. Have you ever knocked something off the table and your spouse helpfully says to you, "You've knocked something off the table"? And Jesus here, in fact, responds to Our Lady with a certain sense of irritation. What does that have to do with you and with me, woman? My hour is not yet come. And you could take that same X-Acto knife and you could cut out all the little bits about the Blessed Virgin Mary and Jesus and their discussion. And you could simply say the wine ran out and there were 6 stone jars, and Jesus said, and this would work perfectly as a passage. You would lose nothing. So clearly John is saying this for a reason. And there's something in the dialogue between Mary and her son which is important. And I suspect that there's a very good sermon there. But like the box of accessories in the Amazon box, we will put that aside and we will treat it for another time. So I am committed at this point in time for a living, breathing, struggling, thriving, interesting Anglican congregation here in this city of Rome, to say something about this story which is useful. Because there's more to it than simply observing with your hands up in amazement. My granddaughter Olivia is 6 years old now. And for 6 years, we have had pictures of Olivia looking at stuff. Livy in her parents' arms looking at horses, looking at castles, looking at a jazz band in the city of Montreal, the back of Livy's head as she looks at things. And this is not a story and an event simply to look at. No, as you're sitting there in your black suit on a Tuesday morning, committed to starting to do a good job again because the Christmas holidays have been long, you say, what will feed this group of people? And so I want to concentrate on the lesser characters in this story. I want to raise a glass of the best red wine, recently decanted from 6 stone jars, to the caterers, to the steward, and either the household servants who've been lent to him for the party, or his own servants that he's brought along with him in the van this day, who are told by Mary to do whatever Jesus says, and are given 2 commands by Jesus. Now, we don't have nearly enough action songs at All Saints Rome, but if we were to come up with an action song surrounding what Jesus says to the servants, it would be this. It would be, fill them up and draw it out. Fill them up and draw it out. We are told in the midst of our lives by somebody, by the preacher, by the Bible, by the tradition that we grow up in, to listen to Jesus. Listen to Jesus and he will set you straight. Do what Jesus says and all will be well. And we are men and women who are being asked to do, in many cases, impossible things. To keep our spirits up when our bodies hurt. To raise our dreadful children and to point them in the right direction. To remain married happily to the man or woman we are married to, even when things are difficult. To keep our spirits up when we have suffered a reversal. To pick ourselves up again when we have landed on our backsides. We are asked to do very difficult things. And I want to take as a paradigm what Jesus tells the servants here. First of all, identify a container, a space, a bit of ground. Not the totality of everything that faces you, Not absolutely everything that you could write down your list that is wrong about life, or that you find impossible, or that you find difficult to do. Identify a container, something contained, a small space. It might be your relationship with your family. It might be your relationship with your work or your schedule. It might be your ability to pray and to feel authentic about your prayers. It might be that few moments in the morning where you utter a few prayers. Identify a container. Next command, fill it with what you have at hand. But wine is required, surely, or gold, or success, or brilliance, or perfect peace, or something that makes a tremendous bump, something that people will throw their hands up when they see the presence of it. No, says Jesus, fill it with what you have at hand. Something as insipid as tap water or water from the pump, and fill it up to the brim. We are men and women with a few talents. Our ability to speak, our ability to write a letter, our ability to bring a little bit of family wisdom, a little bit of family lore, the experience of what happened to me in 1979, the experience of how I got through that. Ordinary conversation, ordinary wisdom, ordinary human ability, ordinary human speech. Jesus says, put that in the container. Now you might say that these little bits and pieces have no natural propensity for turning into anything glorious. They tend to remain there sitting like a dead fish on the floor of our house. Except Mary has said to the disciples, to the servants, and our interlocutor has said to us, listen to Jesus. Do what Jesus tells you to do. And so we muster our few paltry resources and we say, for an hour in the course of the day, I'm going to do this. Is it all of life? Of course it's not. Does it solve all the problems on the list? No, it does not. But it is something, this container, and it is something, these ingredients, which I add to it. All right, Jesus, I will do that. Now, we might then say, okay, I've fulfilled your command. Can I go home now? And Jesus says, no. The next command is this. First, it was fill it up. Next one is draw it out. The servants would have had no problem fulfilling that first command. It would have made sense. There is no more wine. This is a hot country. People will get thirsty. That wee man at table 4 is telling me to fill up 6 big water jars with water. His mother's nagged me and said I'm to listen to him. All right, that makes sense. These people will be thirsty. But now this guest at table 4 is telling me to draw it out of the water jar and to take it to the steward of the feast as if it were something special. And it seems to me that the rubber hits the road on this second command, not simply to marshal our resources, but then in a spirit of faith in the one who has spoken to us, to make them useful and to treat them as if they were not merely insipid things, but something worthy of glory and something which will have its effect on the course of the world. You are being asked to do great things. And in my conversation with the men and women of this parish, I understand what family life can look like. I understand the difficulties with siblings. I understand the difficulties with ill health. I understand the difficulties of battling with depression or battling with financial constraints. You are being asked to do amazing things. And in this particular story from Cana, which the scholars cannot even agree on a particular place. There are about 4 contenders in Upper and Lower Galilee. In this story of the wedding at Cana, Jesus gives us an inkling, which rings true with so much else in the New Testament, that our God calls out of nothing the things that are. And we have enough experience of how people change, of those moments when people turn corners, of those moments when people start to see things again with clarity, that we understand that sometimes it's a mere whisper which changes things. It's a small change of heart which gets the ball rolling again. You ask people why things have changed, and they say, well, they changed in around April, and I'm not sure why. It's as if I began thinking differently within myself. It's as if I began opening doors again that I thought were closed. Small things, subtle things. And it rings true with so much of what God does, that He calls into being the things that are not. And Jesus says, in the midst of this dilemma, find yourself a container. Fill it with what you already have. But because this process is at my command, don't give me that line about how these things can never become glorious. Because I have told you to put them into a container. And I have told you to draw them out as if they were gold. As if they were the best wine, as if they were just the thing that when applied to the lives we lead will touch and change it. Would you bow your heads with me?